And we're live. Here we are. Hi, Carter. Hi, Dr. LaPook. How you guys doing?
Hey, Adam.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Thank you guys for doing this. I'm really excited about what we're about to talk about. And I just want to do a quick introduction. My name's Adam Verdugo. I'm the executive producer of the Evening News. And joining me, I have Carter Evans, who is our West Coast LA-based correspondent, covers a lot of our Money Watch series and, stories that are at the intersection of tech and finance and business and sort of protecting your family. He's done a lot of work in that space for us, and he's got a really exciting piece that we're going to air tonight. Dr. Jon LaPook, CBS News chief medical correspondent. He's a professor and acting physician at NYU Langone. Always an invaluable resource for us. I mean, we're so lucky to have you as part of our team because you're in it, right? You're
Yes.
The stuff we're talking about today. How AI is infiltrating all parts of our life, but specifically the medical field, and how people are benefiting from it, what the potential dangers are. So I just want to lay the groundwork here. We launched about a couple weeks ago a series called The Age of AI, and artificial intelligence is infiltrating all aspects of our life. Like I said, from Hollywood. Carter, you have a piece on scams. John, you're doing a piece on the medical breakthroughs. Ben Tracy later on is going to do a piece about how we're using it to protect the environment. And that's just scratching the surface. So, a good friend of mine, when they saw that we were doing this, she made a comment. She's in the tech space, and she sort of was saying to me that the introduction of AI in our lives is going to be a bigger development and have a greater impact than the invention of the internet and cell phones. And I'm curious what you guys think about that statement, given your reporting, given the work you guys have been doing. Carter, I'll start with you.
I mean, I think it's going to change the world, and it already is, and we don't even notice it, I think, to some degree. It's moving so fast right now. Think about what has just happened since ChatGPT was released less than a year ago. The story I'm going to tell you about that we're reporting on tonight is about using AI to clone someone's voice. This was technically a possibility about 5 or 6 years ago, but it was so controversial that the company that pitched it had to pull down the demo off of YouTube because people were so scared about what it can do. And now you can do this with an app on your phone. So it is here. It is here to stay. The genie's out of the bottle. We have to learn how to work with it.
Yeah, and I think you raise an interesting point there because AI has been sort of democratized. It's been released to the masses, and that's what makes it so promising in some ways, but it also makes it scary, as your piece will lay out, and we'll get to that in a moment in more detail. Dr. LaPook, again, as I mentioned, you're a practicing physician. You see patients every week. You're a gastroenterologist. How is AI affecting the work that you do every day?
It's just beginning to, Adam. In fact, there is a pilot program right here at NYU Langone Health, where I'm a professor of medicine. It involves 6 sites, soon to expand to 25, of using a form of ChatGPT to listen in on a conversation between a patient and a clinician, and then summarize the encounter. And this is a piece I'm doing with Jenny Kamen. You're going to see this soon on CBS Mornings, and perhaps on the Evening News. Are
you making your pitch now? Do you want to make your pitch now? There you go.
You give him a minute and a half.
It's an enormous deal. Okay, I have so many things to say about it. I'll keep it kind of short and set you where I am. This is the first time I've ever broadcast whatever we're doing streamed from my medical office. This is actually where I see patients. Literally 15 minutes ago, I was faced this way. The computer is over here, okay? And I'm looking at that patient. How are you doing? And then I turn and I type. Now I'm typing over here. The patient is over there, and I'm not looking them in the eye. But the promise of a ChatGPT and AI, and just as one sliver of what it could do, is imagine now I can actually look at the patient. It's listening to the conversation, and it figures out what's relevant to my complaint, whatever it is, of bellyache, and what's not. If I throw in something extraneous, it knows how to do that. Now, I've done a demo of this with Peter Lee, who's the head of research for Microsoft. It's kind of amazing. And I'm really not scared of it. I know that, from TV, from movies, it can be very, very scary. But every new technology is initially sort of, the establishment kind of has trouble with it. This is my stethoscope, all right? When the stethoscope was introduced, doctors said, no. They were used to listening to the chest with their ear. This is putting something between me and the patient. When this was introduced, there was no discussion. It was just, here you are. And we've been scrambling to figure it out ever since. AI has been around, believe it or not, for like 50 years, the earliest forms. And people for at least a decade have been thinking very seriously about the ramifications. So I do think we have a head start. We have a lot of space to go. We're certainly not there in terms of getting our arms around it. But I think people are a lot more hip to the fact that this is something we need to do.
Is this something, Jon, that is being taught in medical school? I mean, you're in the academic world. You straddle sort of both. I mean, are you talking to your students about AI and its application?
Yes, we're talking about what it could do. We're talking about the pilot programs. It's already being used to, in certain settings to help read imaging studies, but not instead of the radiologist, sort of as a backup to the radiologist. And I have to say that I've been scrambling, and my students, I've been sharing this, to try to really do a deep dive on the background. I get no kickback on any of this stuff. But, there's a book called The AI Revolution in Medicine that Peter Lee co-wrote with Carrie Goldberg and Isaac Kahana, I think it is pronounced. And that's all about its use in medicine. There's a very deeper book, because I actually am a computer nerd. I did the first fellowship in medical computing at Columbia back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. It was 1983. And I ended up writing software that runs a doctor's office. I sold that to WebMD and promised my wife I'd never do another business. So I've really kind of done a deep dive. This is one called Convergence. It's by Artificial Intelligence and Quantum Computing, Social, Economic, and Policy Impacts by Greg Vigiano. And so I think one of the things that my students, I'm asking them to do is try to do a deep dive to understand what it is, because one of the things for doctors that I will tell you is disconcerting. Months ago, a doctor from the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Friedman, I ran into him, and he said, I'm trying to find his email to me from this morning. He said, Paul Friedman, he said, we can look at an EKG and tell you if you are in the future at risk of getting heart failure from an EKG. And he said, oh yeah, we probably can also tell you your sex and what your potassium level is. I said, how does it do that? We don't really know. It's kind of a mystery. Okay.
Well, and the reason I would suspect that it does that, I mean, the one thing about AI is that it's able to take and process billions of points of data, right? So it looks for patterns. It's basically data processing. It's not something that's I mean, it is creating something sort of new, but it really is just the ability to crunch all this data. So if you have all this data from patients who have had AFib or whatever, or some sort of cardiac event, it can discover those patterns and see if those patterns are present in your current EKG.
And in addition to that, it's like a medical library in your head at the same time, and it referencing every medical text out there. So, it's certainly capable of doing much more than the average human can do. I think it's a matter, though, of there are going to be good uses for this, and there are going to be some not so good uses for this as well. And there are no guardrails right now. It's really the Wild Wild West with AI, and it's already rolling. We can't take it back, so we got to figure out how to work with it.
The other thing that's made it so tough and so rapid, as you pointed out, Carter, and I promise this, I hope this is the last computer nerdy thing that I say, but there have been some technical advances in the last year that have made this fly forward, something called backwards propagation. You have a neural network, and it's basically looking back at these nodes in a neural network and changing the weight and saying, oh, wait a second, I'm going to look back. Which nodes seem to have the most error? I'm going to give them less weight. And the ones that have less error, I'm going to give more weight. And I'm going to do that 1 million times, 10 million times. So astonishingly rapidly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, allowed people, along with, quantum computing and all this other fancy schmancy stuff, to really suddenly get these astonishing results. And yet we still, I, as a physician, if I don't really understand, yes, I understand that you have all of this computing power, but I don't really understand, 2 + 2 is 4. That I understand. But if you say, see this EKG? I'm predicting something years in the future. How? We don't know. Well, then do I trust that? How much do I trust that?
Yeah. Good point. So I want to give viewers a little bit of a flavor of one of our pieces last night. And so I'm going to give a big wind up here so I know that we have it ready. But first, this is about how AI is impacting Hollywood. And I know that's not necessarily your guys' expertise. I know you guys love movies. Have you guys seen the new Indiana Jones?
I have not yet.
Looking forward to it.
I'm waiting for AI to just implant it in my brain. And then I don't know.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's where we're going. Well, we kicked off our Age of AI series last night. And again, we're delving into how it's affecting Hollywood. And I know, many of our viewers will know that this is very much in the news right now because it's one of the hotly contested points in some of the labor negotiations that are going out there with the writers and possibly the actors. And so the one point that Jonathan made last night was how they were able to make, using AI, they were able to make Harrison Ford, who is 80 years old, look younger. And so if we can just play this clip and we'll talk about it on the backside.
At the age of 80, Harrison Ford is starring as Indiana Jones, both old and young. Audiences could soon see a new performance by James Dean, who died in 1955. And an upcoming film will feature Tom Hanks and Robin Wright as they appeared in Forrest Gump nearly 30 years ago.
I'm gonna show you some magic.
This man became famous as a young Tom Cruise, a makeover from the AI company Metaphysic.
I do all my own stunts, obviously.
It is now immortalizing actors through image capture like this to appear in future films without ever being on set. CEO Tom Graham.
There is a move now from many people to preserve their likeness that in the future could be used to create their performance. This is going to be a core asset for every performer.
I could be hit by a bus tomorrow, and that's it. But my performances can go on and on and on and on and on.
But how that likeness is preserved, who has access to it, and who cashes in on it are key concerns of SAG-AFTRA, the union that represents actors.
We're not anti-AI. It is okay for performers' likeness, image, voice to be digitally modeled and captured, provided they know exactly what it's going to be used for and see that there are appropriate safeguards in place to make sure that that data is not made available beyond its intended use.
Safeguards that currently don't exist.
We need to focus heavily on the ethics and how we deploy AI. And so we need to really work hard to move our institutions very, very quickly to be able to accommodate some of these new potential outcomes.
Jonathan Vigliotti, CBS News, Hollywood.
So I thought that was so interesting. And the one thing that I thought of is, if they can create performances with actors, I'm sure they can create performances with regular people like you and I.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they can make me a good actor. Could I be using my likeness? I know not working with much here, but could they make me a good actor? And could I be a Hollywood star through AI? I don't know. That was something that
I would say yes. Based on the experience I had the other day with cloning my voice and my image, and we were using very rudimentary software that you could buy online. And they were taking samples of my voice from news clips. So it was very, present-y sounding and things like that. And so initially when they were typing words out to have it say, it sounded very forceful and choppy, and it didn't sound realistic. He's like, well, let me mess with these things a little bit. He could change the cadence, he could change the tone, the urgency, the things like that. And the next thing you knew, like, it was really convincing. Can I get your credit card info now? And it made that from a news report, that I didn't even say those words. So I do think that is definitely possible. I mean, you can make people say and do anything.
Jon, is there a movie that you would like to re-star in? I'll let you think about it.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about the possibility of taking all the bad actors in the world and making them good actors, both politically and just.
Do you want to name any names, Jon?
There are a lot of bad actors around.
Oh, there you go. So Carter, I mean, you started talking about it a little bit. Let's talk about your piece, because again, when we set out to do this series, we want to cover the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Yours happens to be one of those dangers, and I thought it was scary. But the thing that I thought was so interesting about your piece that's going to air tonight, I don't want to give too much away, but I want to give a little preview, is that your mom's involved. I don't want to give too much away, but you can talk about it.
I mean,
but you had a plan. You had a plan. You had a plan, and that plan didn't work, right?
Like, how realistic sounding is my voice, right? And my thought was, if we could trick my mom, then we could trick anyone, right? I mean, my mom is in her 70s, but she is sharp. She's on top of it. We even discussed this beforehand. We have a family code word because, when I became aware of the story, I said, but there was so much material on me out there. Anybody could do this, and you guys should anticipate it. And so with the cybersecurity expert, we wrote a plausible script, which it was basically trying to get her to divulge some personal information. And it was urgent sounding. It sounded like me. It used facts that you could find about me online, and basically social media, things like that. And she went for it, hook, line, and sinker. Yeah, and I felt really bad about it, but I think it was also a good lesson too. And what was a little scary, and I think you'll see this in the piece tonight too, is like afterwards I called her back, and she was so shaken by it that she was like, is this you now? Like, am I talking to the computer or am I talking to you? And at that point was when she asked for our code word, because she wasn't sure if I was still, testing out the computer with her. And so if my mom could fall for it, I could see how anyone can. And a lot of these scams where, people would call up, they call them the grandparent scams, and they were usually targeted at grandparents, one, because they got money, and two, because they may not have like as often interaction with their grandchildren, things like that. So they may not recognize the voice. And the idea was you would call, hey, grandma, I'm on spring break and I got a little bit of trouble. I need bail. I'm going to put you on the phone with this lawyer. He's going to tell you how to transfer it real quick. Please help me out. And they would just scammers would use their own voices, and they were pretty effective with that scam. Well, now what they're doing is they're targeting people specifically. And a lot of people put social media online. A lot of people's accounts are public. All they need is a 10, 15 second sample of your voice, and they can run it through these processors and literally type out a script and have you say it.
And that's the kind of thing I want to signpost, because in order for them to replicate your voice, you didn't have to participate at all.
No, they did this all before they met me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very, offline. Yeah. I think about sometimes, and I don't want to put any ideas out there, but you get those scam calls a lot, and you answer and you say, hello. You give them a little bit of your voice. I always wonder if in this new world, is that like a mechanism that people are going to get your voice? I don't want to freak anybody out.
Hey, this is a whole nother story, and maybe this is a pitch for it right now, but a lot of banks use voice verification. Now your voice is your password. Oh, yeah. I won't name names right now, but my mom has one of them, and this is how we talked about it. So what we are going to do to test this theory out, and then if it works, I'll pitch it as a story. I'm going to take a sample of her voice from social media, and I'm going to make it say the sentence that everyone has to say that it analyzes your voice. I'm going to see if we can trick it. And if we can get into her bank account, this is a serious problem.
So here's the question.
Just make sure you run it before, in front of legal and standards before you do it.
Yeah.
With the ability to do the deep fake, what is now trusted as reality?
Yeah.
So anybody can say, if somebody videos, well, that was a fake. So does it have to be that the group witnesses it? The State of the Union, lots of people witnessing the same thing, different cameras, same time. What is going to be the way of having a good housekeeping seal of approval?
I mean, I think this is where, we talk in the media world about how there's such a big shift going on right now, from TV to online, from print to online and things like that. I think this is where the media brands that you trust come into play. Our job is to sort through that stuff for you and figure it all out and make sure we've got the real thing and the accurate thing before we even present it to you.
Right.
And I think that's what will help here is these trusted news brands, these legacy news brands like CBS that has been around. We invented the visual storytelling method, and we can be trusted. I think for other people who may get their news in other places, they're going to have to become more responsible news consumers. If you see something, the same way, it's difficult. That's going to be difficult for a lot of people because we're asking them to become news editors, and people train their whole lives to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're actively talking about just amongst ourselves at CBS about this new world we're entering, or we've been in. I'm not saying we've firmly been in this world, and we're adjusting the ways we're covering it. I think we're waiting an extra beat before we do publish something. We're doing as much due diligence. And look, we're not. I don't think anyone can be perfect because the AI is just going to continue to get better. But we are so cautious when we do get that material.
Yes, and I think this is important that people know too. We actually have people who have said here, we're not about getting it first as much as we are getting it right. So if there's a question, don't worry about getting it first. Make sure it's right, and then get it out there.
Yeah.
Because these days, it is so easy to be tempted to repost something or rush it right out there. But there's a lot of analysis behind the scenes.
Yeah, and the damage might already be done at that point in terms of it seeping into the consciousness.
Yeah.
So I wanted to move on to your piece, Dr. LaPook, because I didn't realize this until I was sort of just thinking about what we were going to talk about today. But so Carter's example here is about using a voice to trick somebody, sort of the dangers of this. But you have the flip side of the coin.
I thought the same thing.
In giving somebody a voice that either for some reason medically is not able to. So can you tell us about your piece tomorrow night?
Yeah, I thought the same exact thing. It's a perfect juxtaposition, and I am just a physician, of these two different uses of AI, one for good and one for evil. In my piece, a man in his mid-40s, Brian Johnson, who has ALS, which is a devastating disease that robs people of their voice, literally and metaphorically. So over time, it's a progressive neurological degeneration. And at the beginning, he was able to actually have a pretty normal voice. And at that point, he did some voice preservation work with a lab that is expert in this. Years ago, we did the first piece on this about 7 years ago or so. And all you could do back then was sort of record some phrases like "Hi, hon," "Good night," "Pleasant dreams," "See you later." Things that you could then play by having your cursor. If you lose movement, you have a keyboard that's a cursor and a camera tracks your eye movement, and you can very slowly say, "Play this clip." Now, you can actually go into a lab in about a half hour or so, record just 20 or 30 sentences. Used to be hundreds and take hours. 20, 30 sentences, half hour or so, and now it's got your voice. And now you can pick out the you type out with your eyes as cursors a phrase, and it will then say that phrase just in. I mean, it's really hard to distinguish between the real voice, quote unquote, and the voice that is computer generated. And what this does for families is enormous. He said it just saved my life. His wife said, it's made all the difference in the world. His kids can hear his voice, and you see the smile on his face, even though he's continued to degenerate. He has that voice. He has a voice both actually and metaphorically. So it's a very moving piece to me. I really found a hard time to not burst into tears as he was doing it, because it was just so moving.
I want to add to this real quick to show you how fast this is moving. And this is not a promotion for Apple, but on their new iOS 17, they are releasing a feature called Personal Voice. And basically what you're going to do is train it with your voice, and it will create a replica so that you can send messages in your voice. You can do this on your iPhone in a couple of months.
That seems like a recipe. Wow,
I'm
going to stop myself.
Yeah.
I mean,
genie back in the bottle. It's everywhere.
But when you put it on a map, well, I'm going to stop. So John, I mean, one of the experiences about being human is being able to express yourself. And I can't imagine, I mean, you just sort of touched upon it right now about the ability to express yourself. Yes, you can write. Yes, you can type. Before it was sort of these robotic voices, but it probably means so much to the person who is regaining their voice, not only them, but also their family and loved ones.
Yes. Communication. Remember, when somebody has ALS or any other devastating disease for that matter, it's not just the person, it's a number of people who are affected. His whole family is affected. And this is just uplifting. And people are realistic in his family. They know where this is headed. But just the fact that he can still communicate, I mean, is the basic human need. When during the pandemic, when we had this social isolation, I hated that term. I wanted to say physical isolation. We needed to be socially much closer together. I told people at the end of this broadcast on Stars in the House, we did more than 500 of them, and just said, look, at the end tonight, pick up the phone, call 3 people you know, and just continue, because we know that isolation increases dementia. So you go into a spiral when you have ALS and you have no voice, and you just go down like this. And this sort of kept him emotionally at a much higher level than he would have been. It really is the best possible use that I know of right now of AI. There are other uses of AI, melanoma detection. They're playing with that so that you have a database in the sky of millions of pictures of moles associated with millions of biopsies of those moles. And now you take a picture and send it up, and we're not there yet, but it should be able to analyze and say, go to see your doctor, or there's a low probability. It'll never, I don't think right now, we're not in the position.
Wait, don't say it yet. Don't say it yet, because I want to set this up. Okay. I think you're leading into my next question.
Okay.
But before we get to your next question, I would like to play a clip that you suggested. And if we can do that, Sophie, roll the tape.
Bob Picardo played the emergency medical hologram on the Voyager series.
And then I would appear and I would say,
please state the nature of the medical emergency.
So do you think that eventually in the future, a computer algorithm could entirely replace a physician?
Ultimately, that artificial intelligence physician will be created from the personal experiences of a large group of doctors. So yes, I believe the day will come when you will be obsolete.
Oh, John, when was that?
That was years ago. I have to look about when that was, but how prescient could I be?
Yeah.
We could do a Google search of that, but Sophie, you can tell us.
Yeah.
Sophie Lewis scrambled. I just thought of this like 4 minutes ago, and Sophie Lewis, the fabulous Sophie Lewis, downloaded it. Got it.
Amazing.
Said so. What computer could do that?
Well, I mean, John, just to put a button on that, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier. I mean, the relationship between patient and doctor is one of the most important ones you can have, and having that, that relationship where you can call your doctor, ask questions. Is this really going to make doctors obsolete, or what are your thoughts?
So I have strong thoughts about this. The relationship between a patient and a clinician is absolutely sacred. It's a sacred trust. And I look at this, if we play this right, this extraordinarily revolutionary tool could actually be a conservative force that allows us to practice medicine the way we used to. When computer's never going to hold your hand, Right now, I told you, I'm looking over here. I'm looking over here with my patients over here. There's a great cartoon where, I'm looking at the computer, the patient's over there. I don't like the look of your cholesterol. Meanwhile, the patient's got 8 arrows through them. It's like, look at the patient. The patients miss that. We're buried in paperwork. If we can have AI take the encounter so that I can now look at my precious patient in the eyes and observe body language and really pay attention to tone of voice and write my note for me, and I'll take a look at it, make sure there are no typos. I'm really excited about that possibility. I'll give you a fantasy of mine. Last summer in August, that door over there, you can't see it. That door, a woman I've known for 30 years burst through that door to see me. She said, "Hi." I said, "What's the matter?" She burst into tears. And her life was falling apart. And when she stopped crying, she said, "How did you know?" And I said, "It was too big of a high. That's not your normal high." And then I thought, well, that's great, but then I thought after she left, what am I missing? That was really obvious to me, but what are the subtle things that I'm missing? How about body language? When you say, "How you doing?" "Fine." All that stuff that we may be missing. That I started something called the Empathy Project at NYU Langone 10 years ago. We make Hollywood quality short films to teach clinicians in training to be more empathetic, sensitive, and competent, and empower patients to demand that. You can teach empathy, and you can teach things like reading body language and reading tone. And imagine, you can't do it right now, because I asked Peter Lee, the head of Microsoft, about this. I said, "This is my fantasy." He said, "Well, we can't do it right now." What if it was listening for the last 10 years? And in the middle of my conversation with her, if she didn't give me such a big clue, a little message comes saying, "Analysis of the tone of voice for the last 10 years leads me to believe that there's increased anxiety today. You might think about asking about that." It's not telling me to, it's a suggestion.
Wow. Yeah, a prompt.
Help my mind, a little prompt. And by the way, we're not there with diagnosis yet, but the same thing. It's not going to say, "This is the diagnosis," stamp it on the forehead. But, are you forgetting about Lyme disease? After all, I looked in the demographics. She lives in Lyme, Connecticut. You're telling me she's had fever and aches and pains and a rash.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't think about Lyme disease. I was thinking that she had COVID. So
I think you make a fantastic point, and this comes across in other ways with AI in terms of like AI can help you do some of that. I wouldn't call it mundane work, but it frees you up to do your job better, or to live a better life, or to free up your areas to have that human experience. And it sort of automates that. But leveraging it, like you say, that there's a lot of possibility there.
It's a tool. You have to use the tool right.
Yeah.
I do have one quick question in the chat that I want to make sure that we address. And I think, Dr. LaPook, this is for you. What role do you think AI and AR will play in sports like concussion protocol? And I'll just say for a minute, I don't want to steal his thunder, but I've heard Nate Burleson, obviously a co-host on CBS Mornings, talk about this when he was in the NFL. They were really getting into biometrics and during practice. He tells a story about how he was not feeling so hot, but he kept on pushing it. And somebody from the AI team or the biometrics team said, "Hey, we're going to take it easy today because your metrics are sort of all over the place. We're getting indicators." And he ignored it, and he continued on, and he ended up pulling a hamstring. And which I found fascinating, and I can only imagine, that was a few years ago. I can only imagine that those kinds of things for professional teams are even better than they were. But Dr. LaPook, to that question, how's it going to affect the way we get those quick diagnoses on the field?
Great question, Scott. Yes, we did a piece. We've been following this, concussions, traumatic brain injury in all sports, soccer, women heading the ball. A lot of the data, there was one piece of data where during the middle of the game, you would go off and you would follow a cursor, around the screen, and to see if you had conjugate gaze, to see if your eyes are following it the same way. You can imagine AI really honing in on something like this and saying, "I've now compared your results with the ones from the last million, and here's what it suggests." Brain studies. So MRIs are going to get faster. Right now, I don't know if you've ever had an MRI. You go in and you hear that.
Can we get rid of that, please?
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah. So AI is going to make that shorter. It's going to make it more accessible. the ability to now look at areas of the brain and say, oh, we're not seeing this on your physical exam, but it's brewing over here. I actually have great hopes for it. It's a great question. It really is. That's an example.
I just think about doctors who have to scan, visually scan ultrasounds and mammograms and all those things all day long. And, God, something could be happening in your personal life. A text might come in. You might just miss something. And a computer comparing that analysis to millions of other images is not going to miss it.
Oh, yeah. Or less likely, Carter, that's another great example. With a mammogram, one form of breast cancer shows up with microcalcifications. It looks like little white dots on the mammogram. Well, breast tissue appears white. Fatty tissue appears black. So if you have a lot of breast tissue there and then you have some little, it's like snow on snow. Go pick out that snowball that's in the middle of that snow bank.
Yeah.
But you might be able to do it with AI. So it's just, again, it's looking over your shoulder. It's not saying,
right,
get out of the room, but it's saying,
and to tie it to something that's occurring out here in LA right now, we've got the writer's strike, and one of the big issues for them is they want to try and map out how AI is going to be used. And I mean, I've tested out ChatGPT. You can tell it to write a news story about anything, and it'll do it. It's not that good or accurate, but it can do it, and it's only going to get better. But at the same time, I don't see it, at least right now, as a complete replacement. It just can't do it well. What it can do, and this alludes to what you said, Adam, is it can cue different ideas. When I write a story, it's like putting together a puzzle. Oh, well, this guy said this word down here. I can't repeat it here. What's another way to say this sentence without using word X? And it'll give me 20 ideas, and that may spur the idea that I needed. So that's helpful. That's a helpful way to use it. But I'm not sure it's quite there to replace writing entirely, but it'll get there for sure.
Yeah.
No. And, you've probably heard about this phrase hallucination or hallucinating, right? So AI will give you an answer. It's gorgeous. It's fast. The prompts are there, and here are the references, and you click on the reference and it doesn't exist, or it's to something completely else. Yeah. And it's been given the term hallucinating, not like it's kind of anthropomorphic, but they're not really hallucinating. But they're trying to understand this. And I asked Peter Lee, again, the head of research for Microsoft, about this. And he said they are developing a form of basically a lie detector for the AI machine. That there are certain things that happen in terms of patterns within the computer that they're trying to measure, the way you would measure the amount of sweat coming off your palms or your pulse for a lie detector, and say, wait a second, the computer is nervous. Not that they could be nervous, but there's something a little off here. Maybe we need to check this again.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think we're just scratching the surface here, and it's a topic that I'm interested in. I know the team's interested in. We're looking for stories. Carter, keep them coming. Dr. LaPook, keep them coming.
ChatGPT, please give Adam another story for AI. Make it interesting and not below the line for the public.
There you go.
Oh, we've got one. He pitched another great one. Today.
I sent one to Carter right before this. But Carter, before we go, you're going to be a busy man this week because you have 2 more stories for us on Thursday and Friday. I'm really excited about these. We asked someone to help us out. It's under our Money Watch umbrella. Mm-hmm. And this is, many of our viewers now might be familiar with the name, but he has a show on Netflix called How to Get Rich. And he's a best-selling author, has a lot of unconventional, perhaps, or maybe sort of counterintuitive ideas, counterintuitive views about finance, and we tackle 2 big issues: the big debate versus rent and buying, and then also how to sort of maximize your retirement. But you want to give us a quick preview, and his name is Ramit Sethi.
Ramit Sethi, yeah. So if you don't know the name, when you see him, you'll probably recognize him. He's very energetic, and he's really into the psychology of money and how we think about money and the conventions that we're told about. And ask yourself, do they really apply right now? For instance, we've always been told that owning a home is part of the American dream. That's how you build generational wealth. You got to do it. You got to pay it off, and once you have it paid off, then you go into retirement and you do all the things you wanted to do. And he's asking the question, is that really right for everyone? Because I don't think so, especially with this housing market. A lot of people can't really afford to get into the home, and there are plenty of other ways to create generational wealth. So why are you wasting all this time saving a down payment for a home you're really not going to be able to afford? Let's start living your life now, and let's start planning for the future in other ways. And so he explains why he thinks in some cases, for some people, it makes more sense to rent. And we introduce you to someone who did just that. Very successful business owner in Silicon Valley. He could afford to buy a house right now, but if he did, he wouldn't be able to afford to do the things he loves anymore. So he decides to be a renter instead. So we'll show you that. And then also living your richest retirement, right? We're all kind of taught, and at least the way the system is in this country, you retire when you're 65 or 70 or 72 now, and then you do all the things you wanted to do. And his idea of this is, why wait? Really? Like, why wait? Why not start planning that life now and moving towards it? And we're going to introduce you to a couple who realized they didn't save enough to retire comfortably in the U.S., so they decided to travel abroad for their retirement. They've been doing it for 5 years. Wow. And they love their lives, and they move to a different country every couple of months. And then, of course, when they want to come see family, they rent an Airbnb near them for a couple of weeks. It's a really interesting lifestyle. It's not for everyone, but it can be done. And we'll show it to you this week.
Well, really looking forward to that.
Adam, I just want to add one thing. The fabulous Sophie Lewis found out that clip from Star Trek, where my buddy Bob Picardo, who plays the emergency medical hologram, was threatening to replace me, was 2017.
Wow.
That was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, real quick before we go to, we had that little clip that cybersecurity expert animated my headshot.
Yeah.
You want to put that? It's only a couple of seconds.
Oh, that was cool.
It's really trippy. It looks kind of real. This is a still headshot.
It's from a headshot. Unbelievable.
So this is a static headshot, and it basically was able to animate it and make it look real. I'm sure that this is also, it looks like it's a rudimentary headshot from a few years back, and the fact that they were able the fact that they were able to do that, in the pictures are only getting better, more high resolution. I can only imagine the things you're able to do now.
Yeah.
Well, confession, I have to say to both of you, this is an avatar.
All right, guys.
Good looking one.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. Everybody out there all week long, CBS Evening News, The Age of AI, and we're going to continue the series. As you see here, there is so much to cover. But thank you, Carter. Thank you, Dr. LaPook. Always the best. And
thanks,
thank you.
Thanks, guys. Fun chat.